welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. We are reading Plato's Phaedo. We are at the section where Socrates is giving us his doctrine of what philosophy is. To recap, Phaedo starts with our friend Socrates asking Phaedo, were you there on the last day of Socrates? Did you hear what he had to say? What did he do? What did he make of his life and philosophy itself on his last day? And then we have the account of what happened. So, Socrates is really outlining what might be a strange way of describing what philosophy is. He begins by saying, my friend, send a message to my friend and tell him to follow me as quick as he can. And of course, that's puzzling because Socrates is about to die. How could someone follow Socrates to wherever one goes when they die? Socrates then had to outline exactly what he meant by death. He didn't mean suicide, of course. He meant separating the soul from the body. And he said, by the way, this is what philosophers seek. So, my friends who are here in the prison cell with me, why are you sad? Why do you think I would be upset about having to die, considering a philosopher spends his whole life trying to die and desiring to die and contacting with being dead? So the art and practice of death and dying. So let's jump in and recap his doctrine of what philosophy is, because as this is the quest that we are on, this is the thing that we have to do to reach our destiny, and we want to really understand what exactly philosophy is and how do we do it as best as we can. So let's jump into the text. So, we've begun, he starts off by talking about how all of the ideas we're interested in, greatness, health, strength, justice, beauty, and goodness, we seek to experience it, the ousia of those things, in something called gnosis. What we would say the intuitive, direct experience of each of those beings. Now we approach that through the dianoia. It's what we're developing here, our logos and dialectic. And of course, the two of those together is where we turn and how we make use of our understanding. We have the Greek word for understanding because it's specifically directed to those objects. We're not trying to understand how to make the perfect jelly bean. We're understanding what beauty is, goodness is, justice is. What is true greatness, health, strength? What is ousia, and how can we directly perceive it? It's our understanding that purifies. It's a big idea we have already. We want to track down each of the unalloyed beings. We can recognize that's the activity of the dialectic that we've done, that we recognize at the opening of Parmenides. We are liberating ourselves as far as possible from the eyes and ears, some of the body, because it troubles the soul and does not enable her to acquire truth and phronesis. We are curious about what exactly phronesis is, but it's a big deal. So, let's start from here. We have to carry these with us, by the way. These are big points, and they will help us answer our question. We have a list of questions that we're taking with us. Whole bunch. Whole bunch of questions that after we've gone through the text, we need to go back and make sure we have some sort of answer for them. this section seems to be giving us a overview of what exactly philosophy is. So, take notice then, beginning at 66a, bottom of page 15 in the blah. Take notice then, that person will do this most perfectly. Okay, what's the this? Approach the closest, the intuitive knowing of each being, who approaches each being with self-understanding, the highest use of our understanding and its dianoia, without associating their sight with their understanding, nor dragging any other sense perception, not one with their reasoning. The use of logos, but uses the understanding that one purifies self by self and tries to track down each of the unalloyed beings. Okay, what are the beings themselves? Self by self, by liberating oneself as far as possible from the eyes and ears, and in one word, the sum of the body. Since it troubles the soul and does not enable her to acquire truth and mindfulness. These seem to be the big two we're after in philosophy. And when she is so associated with the body. It is not this one who reaches the being. Is it not this one who can do this? Who reaches being, if anyone does, O Simmias? What you say is exceedingly true, O Socrates. We see the repetition of the if anyone does expression that we've seen all the way through. We are aiming for the best that anybody can do. There may or may not be a limitation while in our human body, but we seek the best that anybody could possibly do, which is excellence, which makes us a philosopher. Part of being a philosopher, central part is seeking excellence. We have our diagram. To recap, we seek excellence, we turn our understanding upon ourselves, we return to what we've read to apply our logos, that's ousia. We look for patterns, skill trees, we look for key terms, we create and carry hypotheses, we look for patterns in order, and we carry questions with us. That's a big deal. Okay, is it not necessarily the case then that all this makes the noble philosophers believe and say in relation to others something like this? Okay, we can recognize already the philosophers in relation to others. This stands out because we can recognize this as one of the categories of the dialectic. In the dialectic, we have, to recap, this guy here. So, it is self in relation to self, self in relation to other. So our subject, how can you talk about it itself? We also recognize in the text, according to self, that's something in the language of Socrates we've seen already. We want to experience ousia and the beings according to themselves. That language, here we go. Is it not the case then that the soul of the philosopher most disdains and flees from Soul of the philosopher most disdains the body and flees from self, for she seeks to be self according to self. Okay, this is the goal of philosopher. And we recognize that category of self according to self. What we want to be. We want to be the self itself. Either the self of the soul or the one self. And then we see, well, how does that state of being affect us? And we have self in relation to other. The other here is us. So, this separate the self in relation to self is the soul. In this section here, in the first category. Then how does it affect us? Well, the text says it purifies us through understanding, through this intuitive knowledge of each being. We are purified. Logos, understanding, gnosis, purification. And it liberates us. So we're liberated, we're purified. So let's do this. Let's fill out this dialectic that he's giving for us here. So for the soul, he's saying, number one, the soul is to contemplate, contemplation, or rather, how about this? So contemplation might be what we do. So the soul itself is the knowing of ousia and each being. Self in relation to others. So what does the soul, this is the soul. What does it do for us? It purifies us. Look at the text. Purifies self by self. Using the understanding, using our logos, using our dianoia. It purifies. It liberates. And it enables us to acquire truth and mindfulness. So long as we are, in a word, separated from the troubles of the soul. So, write that down. Purifies, liberates, enables us to acquire AQUIRE, truth and phronesis. We're loosely calling that mindfulness, but we have a question. What is phronesis? We can also look to the text again and say, hang on a second. we have the opposite here as well. The sum of the body, we want to separate as far as possible from the eyes, ears, and in a word from the sum of the body, since it troubles the soul. So we can have its opposites. When we do the dialectic, we have to do two what ifs. This is the exercise that we are to do. This is the direct path. This is the purification. This is the logos and dianoia. What we're doing right now. We're doing it. So we have to do a if. What if it is? We also have to do what if, oops. So we have to do a what if it is, category A, and category B. What if isn't? So we can recognize in our text, if we are not able to experience the soul self by self, the word self by self gave it away. Self by self is this. We recognize the language. See, this is the significance of looking for key terms. In the text, he was talking about the self in relation to itself. See, oh, I know that word. That's the expression. That's the first category of the dialectic. So we're doing, okay, well, let's do that. Let's see what he's giving us to do. So we recognize that there's a puzzle that the author is giving us to solve, and then we solve it. So what if it isn't? Well, we are what are we doing? We are looking through the text here, looking for something. Oh, we're dragging along sense perceptions. So we are dragging along sense perceptions. And the expression is eyes, ears, and the sum of the body with our reasoning. So if we are not able to have the soul, to experience the soul by itself, we're still reasoning. We're still human beings. We still reason. That's kind of what we do all the time. But we drag along sense perceptions, our reasoning. Oh, let's go. Oh, and the expression here, and the sum of the body. And the sum of the body with our reasoning and dianoia. Dianoia, which of course is understanding applied specifically to the most meaningful things, the realm of being and the self. So all of those things we're interested in experiencing self by self, so long as we're applying our reasoning to that, that's dianoia. Okay. So what happens? Well, if we can, we are liberated. So let's go back to our notes. That's that first category. What can you say about the subject in relation to itself? Well, what is the self soul on its own? It's the knowing of the ousia of each being. Intuitive, direct. Let's say, got to confirm what kind of knowing it is. Gnosis. 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 Direct. Intuitive knowing. So the direct intuitive knowing of the ousia and each being. Or if we don't have this, we are dragging along our sense perceptions and the sum of the body with our reasoning and dianoia. So the next category is, well, how does the soul itself affect another? So the self in relation to another. What does it do for us? It purifies, liberates. It enables us to acquire truth and phronesis, which is the big things we want. We want to know the truth about ourselves and reality. And we want this virtue, the special virtue that seems to be above all the other virtues. He's already mentioned that his friend Euvenos, who's a philosopher, if he's been doing philosophy rightly, he's been practicing the virtues, and he's got sophrosune. So the four primary virtues of temperance, sophrosune, courage, wisdom, and justice. Of course, justice being the monad on top. If you have all the virtues, you'll be doing your right functioning. Okay, but this leads us to, well, what do we want for those things? Phronesis. There's a kind of fifth virtue that stands out for us, or a goal that we have. We don't quite know what it is, and one of our questions is, what the heck is phronesis? We're calling it mindfulness, but that word could mean a lot of things. But we want truth and phronesis. So that's really highlighting that phronesis is one of the key goals we're after. But if we don't have it, what happens? Let's see if we can find it in the text. So how does the soul relate to us if we don't have it itself on its own, self by self? So let's read this again. Take notice then, the person who will do this most perfectly, who most approaches towards each being with the self-understanding, without associating their sight with their understanding, nor dragging along any other sense perception. That's what we're not doing. Not one with their reasoning, but uses their understanding that purifies self by self. There's our expression that lets us know, hey, this is a dialectic for you to do, and tries to track down each of the unalloyed beings self by self. Again, do the dialectic by liberating oneself as far as possible from the eyes and ears, and in a word, from the sum of the body, since it troubles the soul and does not enable her to acquire truth and mindfulness. Okay, so we can add this. Troubles the soul. Troubles the soul. Okay, we could say it does not allow for this, but we already have it. We already have it now in the A side of our dialectic, so we don't have to repeat ourselves. Also, if we can help it, it's best to put the positives in. So you could say, it troubles the soul. If we don't have the soul self by self, we are troubled by our physical senses, and we're not able to acquire truth and phronesis. But on the other side, we're saying we are able to acquire truth and phronesis. So one's a negative, one's a positive, saying the same thing, but one is and one isn't. So Equally so on this side, you could say, well, what happens if you do have the soul itself? Well, you are purified, you're liberated, you are enabled to acquire truth and phronesis, and you're not troubling the soul. You're not dragging along sense perceptions and the sum of the body. Okay? So we don't want to double up. So we'll just put the positives if we can. So the next category of the dialectic is, this is our model: self to self, self to other, other to other, other. How does that other then, having been affected by self, how does that other function in relation to another other or other others? And finally, how do those others at the end of this line, at the end of this progression, relate back to the start? Return home. Having gone through this, what happens? How do we go back? And so we see, of course, this reflects the logos. Somehow there's an original first cause, and it has some essence of its own, but also we have a creation, we have an unfolding of the universe, of the realm of being into the physical realm. So there's an unfolding through some sort of knowable and understandable pattern we call the logos and the dialectic, and then reaches us at the end, a human, an evolved species who has intelligence and the ability to share in the logos and use that logos to reflect on their own self, allowing us to reach this stage where we can relate back to the start. Given this, how do we relate back to the first cause? Can we return home? So in philosophy, this is called emanation and reversion. This returning home we can recognize as well as our keyword ousia. So how do we do that? And how do we relate back to philosophy? Well, that's why we're reading the text. How do we relate to philosophy? How do we relate to the oneself? Philosophy. How do we relate back? The logos, the dialectic. We purify and liberate ourselves through dianoia, while not attaching ourselves to our physical senses as far as possible, so we can grasp and contemplate the ousia of each of the beings and ousia itself. Gnosis. This is how we return home. So our next category is other in relation to other. So we might find it here. If so, we need to look out for a language that gives us a hint. Is it not necessarily the case that all this makes the noble philosophers believe and say in relation to others? Okay, in relation to others. These are the others, the philosophers, who are the ones who pull off the stunt. How do they function in relation to others? Alarm bells go off. Do I have a sound effect for alarm bells? Okay, I don't yet. Alarm bells go off for us. And we say, okay, that's not an alarm bell. Yeah, that's enough. So what do we do in relation to others? We say this: inasmuch as there is likely to be, just as if there were a straight path with no deviations to guide us along with the logos, in the consideration that as long as we possess the body, our soul, she is contaminated with such a corrupting agent. We shall never sufficiently attain what we desire. So this is how we say, okay, so how do we function in relation to others? We say something like this. And we affirm this to be the truth. For on the one hand, the body keeps us busy in numberless ways through its need for sustenance, right? You could eat them sandwiches. And on the other hand, when any disease befalls it, it will impede our chase for being reality. Okay, so what are we doing? We're chasing reality. What we're doing as a philosopher. So if that's the case, then we have to look for, we are impeded by diseases, and our sustenance keeps us busy. For the body fills us with many passions, desires, fears, illusions, foolishness, so that the saying goes, in truth and in reality, not any phronesis, not any mindfulness of any kind whatsoever arises in us because of this. Okay, little s. It, because of it. Because of what? Because of this connection to the body. The corrupting agent. For the body and its desires gives us nothing other than war, civil discourse, and battles. For all wars arise through the acquisition of possessions. For it is for the sake of the body that we are compelled to acquire riches, being enslaved to its care. Okay, keyword enslaved here. This is the metaphor of Socrates being chained. Because through and out of all of this we have no leisure for philosophy. Oh no, tragedy. But worst of all, the fact is that if there arises for us some rest from the body, we turn to some study, everywhere in our search it again falls in and presents itself in a clamor, pouring in. It drives us out of our mind. Oh my God. So that we are not enabled by self to behold the truth, but as it has truly been shown to us, if we ever intend to enter into a pure state, one must be liberated from the body, and we must behold self-realities with the self-soul. Okay, we've got a lot there already. Let's go with this. So we have some more, we really need to expand our dialectic. Because we have, okay, let's start with what we've got. So if we have this separation from the soul, what is it? Itself itself. Gnosis, direct intuitive knowing of ousia and each being. How does it function in relation to us as people, as philosophers? It purifies, liberates, enables us to acquire truth and phronesis. We have some more things that we can add to this if we want to, expand it out. It's good to, take as much with us. What are we doing? We are trying to walk the straight path with the logos. We are chasing after something. What was it? Chasing reality. So we talk in this way. So how do we relate to other philosophers, other people on the path. We talk in this way and talk something like this. Okay. Believe and say in relation to others something like this. Okay, so we've got believe and say to other philosophers this dialectic we're doing here. We say this stuff. And we also so we believe and say in relation to others something like this, and we affirm this to be the truth. So we talk in this way, we start with some belief, but then we have to affirm this to be the truth. This, of course, is the progression from advice or beliefs. To affirm this, of course, you have to go through dianoia, have it for yourself. It's what we're doing right now, through this very activity, this dialectic we're doing here. And of course, the affirmation of the truth is only achieved with this. Okay. And on the other side of the coin, if we're not able, if human beings are unable to be a philosopher, if we are unable to separate the soul from our physical bodies and become liberated, what follows? We have passions, desires, fears, illusions, and foolishness. So I might even put this. The body fills us with passions, desires. Hey, welcome back to the chat. Good to have you back. To recap where we are in the Phaedo again. We're going over Socrates' explanation of what we do in philosophy. Stuffies isn't here yet. And we recognize that when Socrates is saying, okay, this is what we're after. We want the intuitive, the direct knowing of each of the beings, such beings like beauty and good and strength and greatness. The ousia, of course, is the existence of the beings. They don't have a physical existence because they're non-physical. They're prior to the physical, but they have something to maintain them. So how do they keep their oneness? Ousia. What's ousia? The quality of consciousness to turn around upon itself and know itself. So that keeps its oneness. Of course, ousia is like a sixth sense. It's like, so Socrates is talking here. We want to liberate ourselves as far as possible from the eyes and ears and inner word, the sum of the body. For it troubles the soul, and it does not enable us to acquire truth and mindfulness, a special word called phronesis. Now, we have to carry that as a question because we don't have what phronesis is yet. We know it's very, very important. We have a loose translation of mindfulness. What does that mean? That means that our physical senses prevent us from acquiring these two things. So what we're doing now is realizing he's giving us a lot of information. We have to do some work. We have to prepare ourselves to be able to experience this. We recognize this by certain key language, self by self. And then later on we recognize in relation to the others. that tells us that he's giving us a sign. The sign is to do the dialectic, take this information and lay it all out. Why? Because the dialectic has 4 categories. When you want to understand something with the dialectic, whatever it is you want to know, beauty itself, justice itself, goodness itself, the soul itself, which is our one right now, the first thing you do is talk about itself. What can you say about the soul in relation to itself? Self to self. Then, after you've talked about that, what can you say about how the soul functions in relation to some other? Self to other. Then after that, those others who have been affected by the soul, how would they relate to other others? Others to others. And then finally, these others here, having gone through this process, how do we relate back to the start? So this is the exercise called the dialectic, which is the structure. Yeah, it's very math-like. It's like a structure in which we can organize our thinking. But Socrates is saying this structure is the structure of the universe. You'll find this 4-part structure in everything. But also, it's our way home. It's our way to elevate, or purify and perfect our own souls. This is a special kind of understanding called dianoia that perfects and purifies us and allows us to open up a 6th sense, the eye of the soul called ousia. The pure mind that can experience the higher dimensions of reality. That's what we want to know. Because that's where being is. That's where justice is. So we recognize the language, this language, and this language. So we're like, oh, okay, let's do it. So we've gone through this section here, and we've pulled out the key terms to put them into the structure. So we're doing the work. But so far we've got this. What is the soul? What is the soul? Self by self. And he said it's noesis. It's a term we don't have in English, so we're going to use the Greek. Noesis. Loosely translated, it's direct, intuitive knowing. That's the ousia. You can intuitively know it by contemplating or joining with it completely. The same way, you have a finger, right? Someone doesn't have to prove to you have a finger. You feel it. It's part of you. Now imagine if you could have that kind of knowingness, but for your complete self. You could know every part of yourself because it's not physical, it's not limited. So you could say, well, this finger can touch my palm here. I can close my fist. But this part can't connect with this part. And this part can't connect with this part. Some parts can connect, but some parts can't. Right? This is the problem of love. We have someone that we consider beautiful and we want to smush ourselves together with that person because we want to join with them. But there are lots of parts that can't connect. Right? Now, the mind doesn't suffer from this physical limitation. It can completely turn about upon itself. Right. It's more like you know that you have toes because you can feel them, you can wiggle them. But if you can also engage your intellect, see, that's a physical knowing because you are connected to it physically. But there's a way of connecting mentally or intellectually that is an even more intimate, immediate, all at once knowing. Now, we have something like that called insights or intuition. You might have a feeling of knowing something all at once, like, oh, have this intuition. I mean, I could take time and explain all the parts, but I know it all at once. That's a smaller version of this. It's like a mini enlightenment, a mini ousia, an insight or an intuition. So, our first category of the dialectic is, by the way, when we're doing a dialectic, if the soul is, you have to do 2 parts. What if it is and what if it isn't? And you have to use the text as well. So in the text, he says, well, what if you can separate the soul and have the soul on its own? meaning it exists purely outside of the physical. What is it itself? Noesis of the ousia and of each of the beings. Self by self. A first category. A second, how would that thing we've just described, how does it affect something else? How does it affect us as people or philosophers who are doing this? In the text, it purifies, it liberates. So doing this, separating the soul from the body, purifies and liberates us. It also enables us to acquire truth. We want to know what that is. And phronesis, we want to know what that is. But Socrates is using them in a way that makes us think this is kind of the goal. We really want this. So equally so, what if we can't separate the soul from the body? So the same categories, but if it doesn't exist, well, you are, in the text, you are dragging along your sense perceptions and the sum of the body with your reasoning and your understanding, your dianoia. That's what you'll be doing if you can't pull a stunt off. And then, that's self by self. If it doesn't exist, self to another, how does it function? How does it relate to another if it doesn't exist? And we've got, it troubles the soul. And then we've also got, this is where we are right now, it troubles the soul. It is a corrupting agent. We never sufficiently attain what we desire. It keeps us busy. So these are all things we have to write down now. Troubles the soul. It's a corrupting agent. We never sufficiently attain what we desire. That's a negative, but we'll put it like it's what we can't do. What are the words under the explanations? What are you pointing to? Here? This is self and other. A dialectic is fundamentally, its dia means two. It's a relationship between two fundamental things. And the other explanation. This one here? What if the soul exists? That's category A. And then we have category B. What if it doesn't exist? If it does exist, number 3. Oh, okay, you're jumping ahead. We're not there yet. Okay, not there yet. Okay, we're not there yet. We're finishing number 2 here, which is self to another. Number 3 is other to other, which means if the soul affects us as philosophers, how do we then relate to other people? How do we talk to other philosophers? Others to others. Okay. What we've got so far is from the text. Socrates says, is it not necessarily the case then that this makes the noble philosophers, you and me, believe and say in relation to others something like this? Inasmuch as there is likely to be, just as if there were a straight path with no deviations to guide us along with the Logos, in the consideration that so long as we possess the body and our soul, the body is a corrupting agent, and we shall never sufficiently attain what we desire. And we affirm this to be the truth. Okay, so how do we relate to others if the soul exists? We talk in this way. We believe in this way, and we say in this way, and we affirm this to be the truth. So that's what we wrote down for how do we relate to others if the soul exists. We believe and say this. We believe and say this to other philosophers. This. Now this refers to the entire dialectic which we're doing, because that's what Socrates is doing. We can recognize there's a structure in his thinking but he's laying it out for us. And our work is to take all the clues. We're like as this is the archetype for like a video game. It's like a video game creator gives you a bunch of the pieces of the puzzle and you've got to solve the puzzle yourself. Or like a Sherlock Holmes, you've got to find the clues and put it all together. So we can recognize that he is thinking in this way. We can recognize the key expressions, self to self, in relation to the others. That's literally this. That's literally the language of the dialectic, which tells us, yes, we are playing the detective role. We are Sherlock Holmes. That's what we are. We're Sherlock Holmes and we are...
You're a wizard, Harry.
We're a wizard, Harry. Because I say that because this is the archetype or the paradigm for the detective or the hero's journey. You could say, well, everything that's engaging in a game, in a TV show, in a movie, has some sort of hero who has to solve a puzzle, figure something out, and as he does so, he levels up. And he has some sort of character development. In fact, there's a whole study on the hero's journey that if you do screenwriting, you'll study the work of Joseph Campbell, the hero of 1,000 faces. So he recognizes that in all traditions, in all mythologies, there seems to be an underlying structure of what the hero goes through. Now, in philosophy, we ask a certain question about everything. If there are particular examples, if there are A's, what is the? If there are particulars, what's the ideal? So if there is a beautiful thing, many beautiful things, what is beauty itself? That's the philosophical question. And so in a similar way, we can ask, well, if there are many examples of the hero's journey, of the detective role, what is the ultimate? That's the game we're playing now. Why do we say it's the ultimate? Because it's the Socrates is saying this is how we should spend our life in the time before the sun sets. And it's also the way in which we can discover the things we're really after, justice itself, the soul itself. By the way, if we don't, we have this side of the dialectic. What happens if you can't do it? You will be dragging along your sense perceptions with your reasoning. You'll have your soul being troubled. Your body will be a corrupting agent. It will also, you'll never sufficiently attain what we desire. So what you can say is, this is what's true about it. You could also say what's false about it. So within the dialectic, we have these 4 categories. And of course, they're in 2 halves. What it is and what it isn't. Whoops. But we also recognize within each of these categories, you can pretty much say 3 kinds of things. You can say what's true about it. You can say what's false about it. And what's false about it is you'll never sufficiently attain what we desire. This is a not. You can't do it. You'll never sufficiently attain what we desire. Make sense? Everything we desire because we think it's good. But then we ask the question, well, if there are many things that are good, what's the good? What's the end of the game? What's the thing that actually makes us happy? Sometimes we're mistaken. Everything we do is we think it's good. That's what we desire. What's the final goal? The good itself. And if we can't pull this stunt off, have the soul by itself. And also we can say, then we'll never attain to that. What's true and false. We can also say what's true and false. True in one way, but also false in another way. Okay, these are 3 subcategories. So you could say, well, The dialectic, zoom in a bit, has this structure. Dialectic has two sets. If it is, if your subject is, and if it isn't. I like to use this example. If you go to work and you start to notice that your lunch goes missing from the break room, and you think, oh, that's that Bill. I reckon it's Bill stealing my lunch every day. Well, you have to say, okay, when Bill is at work, does my lunch go missing? Yes, every day Bill's at work, my lunch goes missing. It must be Bill. But then you come in and say, well, hang on a second. What about the days that Bill isn't at work? If there's a day where Bill isn't at work and your lunch goes missing, then it might not be Bill. You got to do both. So whatever we're interested in, right? And all of them, like we're interested in justice. Well, what if justice exists? Exists, meaning eternally in the realm of being. We don't just have examples, a just person. It's the boss 100% because the boss is always at work. Yeah. Right. Must be. Greedy boss. So if the subject is or if it isn't, you have the three categories. What can you say about the thing itself? What can you say about how it relates to another? How do those things relate to others? And finally, those others that have been affected, how do they relate back to the original? We have that for both. Self, self-other. So I like to use another example because in the Phaedo, Socrates has been talking about mythologizing. Don't just do philosophy. Don't just explain it. Make stories about it. They're easy to remember and they're fun. So he uses Aesop's fables and he also makes his own up. So that's kind of old-fashioned. We might use Spider-Man. So we might say, okay, if Spider-Man is... Okay, Spider-Man for us is going to represent, let's say, knowledge. The knowledge that we've been talking about. Being able to separate the soul from the body and have this ousia experience of directly being like we know our toes, directly knowing the nature of reality. Okay, if that exists, but we're not going to just do a dialectic on if knowledge exists. We're going to make a myth using Spider-Man. So, we could say, if Spider-Man is, you and me will know it's knowledge, but maybe we won't tell the public because we need to give them a puzzle for them to solve. Because they need to learn to be a detective too. What can you say about the self itself? What can you say about Spider-Man himself? Well, so the first part of your movie or your comic, depending on what kind of an artist you like to express yourself as, would be about Spider-Man. What's he like? What is he? How does he dress? Like, what does he feel about being a superhero? Okay, like, so what if he was bitten by the spider? But you also have to make another movie. What if he wasn't bitten by a spider and didn't become Spider-Man? You know Spider-Man, right? This isn't crazy to you. Yeah, he can shoot webs. Yes, he can shoot webs. So you'd have this. He can shoot webs. But you can say what's true about him. So then you'd have to also say what's false about him. What would you never say about Spider-Man if he was a superhero? Webs. You would never say that he is, what? An ordinary human. Yeah, he's not ordinary. You would never say he's ordinary. what's something that's true in one way but false in another, but not true in another way? Like, in one way he's, or maybe we could use ordinary. In one way he's ordinary because he goes to school, but in another way he's not ordinary because he can slow down time and beat up bullies. Or something like that. Or what's something that's both true and false? In one, he has teenager problems. In one way he has teenager problems, but in another way he doesn't because he's half human. Right. In one way he's human, but in another way he's superhuman. Right. So in each of these you can say what's true and false and both true and false about them. So, of course, this is a mythology that we're using to communicate or remember knowledge. So when we learn about knowledge, like we're learning here, we could say what's true about knowledge, what's false about knowledge, and what's both true about knowledge. Then the next part of your movie, Act 2, you might say, you have to talk about how does Spider-Man relate to another? How does Spider-Man, given everything our first act, it tells you what Spider-Man is. He's got webs. He's not ordinary. He's human with human problems, but he's also superhuman with superhuman problems. So it's true, false, and both. You've established your character. Now you have to talk about how he functions. How does he relate to the people of New York? So what's true about how he relates to people of New York? What would you say that's true about how? So what we've done is we've picked an other people. So if when we're doing a dialectic on knowledge, we might pick right. So how does he relate to the people of New York? He is born there. He is he's native. He's one of them. He also saves them from robbers, rescues them. What's false about him? What would you never say in this universe about Spider-Man and how he relates to New Yorkers? So this could be a dialectic on knowledge. We could say, okay, in our minds, Spider-Man represents knowledge and others represents ousia. How does knowledge relate to ousia? How can we understand more about knowledge by using our learning about what ousia is? He is the most evil villain, yes. You will never say he is the most evil villain. And what's both true and false about Spider-Man in this world? Or something you can say about how Spider-Man relates to New Yorkers that's true in one way, but not true in another way. Yeah, it's a tricky one. This is the tricky one. Maybe he how does he relate to New Yorkers? That's true and false. He I don't know, what does he do? How does Spider-Man relate to New Yorkers? He Hmm. Hey, this could be the unique aspect of what makes your movie your own. He responds to calls when he's there. Yes, he responds to calls from. He responds to emergencies. Let's zoom in a little bit. He responds to emergencies, but technically he can focus on his girlfriend first. Right, yes. So if you wanted to, I've made my movie about how Spider-Man relates to New York. You could make a movie and your other you could pick is the girlfriend. So the self could be Spider-Man. And it could be, first you talk about Spider-Man himself, how he relates to his girlfriend. And then the third act would be how his girlfriend, who now has a superhero boyfriend, how she acts to people in the world, how she acts to her best friend, how she relates to her boss. So this could be yours. And this particular one we're doing here, we're talking about Spider-Man relating to New Yorkers. So he responds to emergencies, but sometimes he's not in New York because he's out with the Avengers and he can't. Sometimes he's away with the Avengers fighting Thanos in space and he can't respond to emergencies. Okay? So often when you're writing your story, this is where the drama can pick up. Because now that we know Spider-Man self to other relates to others in that way, how do the New Yorkers relate to themselves? How do those others relate to others? And maybe because he only responds to some emergencies, some people, you could say what's true and false about them is they love Spider-Man, but that's true because they love him when he saves them, but it's also false because they hate him because sometimes he's away and he's not there. He thinks he's better than the New Yorkers. He's off with the Avengers or something. This can be your conflict. So what could you say about the New Yorkers? Given everything we have in Act 1 and Act 2, what would you say is true about how New Yorkers, right, you could call him a simp. If he's busy with his boyfriend, Iron Man or whatever, they might get mad. So you could say what's true about him. What's true about how the New Yorkers talk to other New Yorkers? Maybe they celebrate him. Maybe they make news articles in the newspaper. Newspaper articles. What's false? What could you never say? Given that this is everything we've established, what would New Yorkers never do to other New Yorkers in relation to Spider-Man, having been affected by Spider-Man? Maybe they would never, they'd never ignore him, maybe. They'd never be unaware. And what's true and false, maybe they love him, but also maybe sometimes they hate him. But yeah, they would never that's a good one. That's a good one. They would never assassinate him. Why? Because our story has shown us that he helps them. He responds to them. He helps them. He rescues them. So they would never assassinate him. Also, we know from Act 1, he's superhuman. So they would be unable to assassinate him. Then finally, the last act would be, given all this, how do the New Yorkers relate back to Spider-Man? Maybe this one would go there. What would they do in relation to Spider-Man? Yes, I think this one would go here. So because this is New Yorkers in relation to other New Yorkers, others to others. So maybe they would never plot together. And so how do they relate back to Spider-Man? Yeah, see, this is the wrong one as well. Maybe they'd celebrate him. So how do New Yorkers relate to other New Yorkers? They'd be happier, maybe, with less crime. They'd be friendlier because they feel safer. They feel safer. So as a result of all this, how do they relate back to Spider-Man? They might celebrate him. They make newspaper articles. In your story, they might make him the mayor. What's false? We said they would never try and assassinate him. And what's both true and false? Maybe this one goes down there as well. Some people, I don't know, it's true and false, they would, maybe they'd, this is a tricky question. Yeah. I mean, it's fun because it gives you a framework into which you can put all of your understanding about Spider-Man. Like if a game developer came to you and said, we want to make a game about Spider-Man, you have to think of, okay, what's my story going to be about? So this gives you a structure where you can put all of your understanding. But what's really interesting is after we've gone through this, we will have realized that we've learned more by this process, which means after we make a dialectic, we go back to the start and we start again, because this activity gives us new understanding. So we're evolving. That activity of going back to the start and starting again and taking your logos, your understanding with you, that's ousia. That's as close to ousia as we can get in our physical bodies. But also we have to, in the dialectic, we have to do the same, but for what if Spider-Man was never bitten by the spider? That's the key thing in the dialectic. Okay? You could make this a part of your movie. You could start off in this world, but then maybe something could go, like Dr. Strange could go back in time and stop him from being bitten by the spider, and now you're in this world where you have to create a different kind of universe, but what if Spider-Man was not a superhero? Same categories. Now, what does this mean? It means we've got, the dialectic has A and B. It has 4 categories. And it has 3 subcategories. What's true, false, and both true and false. Giving us 12, 4 times 3, and 12. Okay, so we can recognize here is a set of 12. Why is that interesting? Well, Plato has his own mythology, and he has 12 Olympian gods. So we can ask, is there a reason? Is the structure of the dialectic the same structure that applies to other things? Are we not just doing a fun exercise of purifying our understanding and how to organize our thoughts to make a cool game or a comic book or a movie? We're not just doing that. We're somehow sharing in a structure that's inherent to reality itself. That's what Socrates is saying. This isn't just for making myths. It is for making myths. It's how you make the best myths. It's how you make the best games and stories and stuff. But it's also a way of purifying your understanding. So we can see, in order to do this, we've had to purify our understanding about Spider-Man. But then we have to go back. We've got this new understanding. Having gone through all this, we go, oh yeah, you know what? So here's the big conflict. How do the New Yorkers relate back to Spider-Man? They would never assassinate him. It's true that they celebrate him and they make newspaper articles, but what's true and false is they, I don't know, maybe this is where the conflict is. Some New Yorkers like him, but some don't like him because he's a vigilante. Maybe they don't like that he's taking the law into his own hands. So then you go, oh, okay. I see something more about Spider-Man. I'm going to do another one, start again, but use this. This vigilante thing is the key. I'm going to do another one, do another dialectic on Spider-Man for my movie. But when I talk about what's true, I'm really going to use this vigilante thing about him. Maybe when I say what's true about Spider-Man, I'm not just going to focus on his webs. I'm going to focus on how he wants to be a leader, how he wants to solve problems, how he wants to fix things. Why? Because these are all the traits that will help him be a vigilante. So you're taking your understanding, you're bringing it back to the start, and you're looking at the subject in a new way. How does Spider-Man relate to others? Well, I'm not going to focus on how he relates to New Yorkers anymore. I'm going to focus on how he relates to his school. He wants to take over the school. He wants to fix the problems in the school. He wants to beat up the bullies in the school. Why? Because he wants to be a vigilante. So you're taking your understanding back to the start and you're doing it again. And then you might go through and you realize, after all of this vigilante dialectic, you know what I reckon? At the end of it, like maybe he's a vigilante and then people at his school, other conflicts happen. And then how do those school kids relate back to Spider-Man, the last one? Others back to himself, others back to the subject. Or maybe they hate him. So what's true and false? Maybe his girlfriend hates him. Because it's true that he hates him because she hates Spider-Man, the vigilante. But it's false because she loves Peter Parker, the dude. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do another one about the girlfriend. So I'm going to learn more about what Spider-Man is as a person and how he relates to his relationships. And I know more about Spider-Man as a person. You're building up a more complex and more full understanding of Spider-Man by going through this universe building structure, this universe building activity. By the way, everything you do, make sure you do what if he wasn't a Spider-Man? What if he wasn't bitten by a spider? Or what you could do is, he's still bitten by a spider, but what if he wasn't one of the Avengers? You got to have something for what he is and if he isn't. This is what happens if he was in the Avengers. This is what happens if he wasn't. This is what happens if he was bitten by a spider. This is what happened when he wasn't. You have to do both. So why do we care? Well, because this is mythology. But mythology is used to represent the truth. If we apply this, to what's actually real, what in philosophy, what Socrates is saying is actually real. Because Spider-Man's fictional. That's why it's a myth. So you could say mythology is both true and false. Mythology is both true and false. Why? It's false. There isn't actually Spider-Man. It's made up. But we are using the true structure of the dialectic to build our stories, and we're using it to represent true ideas. Because in our minds, we're using Spider-Man to talk about justice itself, that we learn through philosophy, or beauty itself, or what the good is, or what the realm of being is, or what knowledge is. It's like a way of remembering and talking about the philosophical ideas. So if mythology is both true and false, we could say that philosophy is true, or the logos. The logos is the key terms, the dialectic structure, all of the parts that we are using in our understanding. But what's interesting is, we talked last time about how we also have problems, or the anti-logos. Because we're humans, or the pathologos, that just means sick logos, but at a fundamental level. That means that while we have we can have a mythology like we're building ourselves, or Plato is using, or Socrates is using, to represent what's true about reality, about our soul, about the meaning of life, about why we're here, we also grow up in a human culture, which hasn't embraced the logos yet. Meaning, depending on your family, your society, and the time that you're born, like the period of history, you are going to have a mythology that's going to be representing the anti-logos or the pathologos. Maybe you're going to fear death. Maybe you think there is no such realm as being. Maybe you think there is no such thing as knowing. Maybe you think you're not good enough. Maybe you think you're useless. You're these kinds of fundamentally false beliefs about yourself, about reality, and your ability to understand things. So you could say this is fundamentally false. So here is our triad. What's true, what's both true and false, and what's false. Now, we've already seen, so we've got two different triads. This is why we talked about being a detective, a philosopher as being a detective, but we're also a hero in a game or a movie, because we develop our skill trees. Like in a game, the more you use a bow and arrow, the more skills you are going to find, you're going to discover with archery. You're going to become a better archer. Now, the archetype philosophy, what the real thing is, the skill trees are these things. Triads, threes, or triads. The more you look into philosophy, the more you'll discover, there's a triad, true, false, and both, that we use in the dialectic. Cool. I'm going to take note of that. I'm going to put that into my triad skill tree. Why? Well, later on, we can think about, hang on a second. Yesterday, we talked about philosophy being what's true, our problems, our false beliefs being what's false, and our mythologies could represent either. So our mythology is a fictional story that can represent what's true or false. Oh, this is another triad. So what happens is, we have a triad from today, and we have, this is our three skill tree, a triad from today, true, false, and both. A triad from yesterday, philosophy, or logos, pathologos, and mythology, and we can connect them. You can realize, hang on a second, they fit together, meaning we can understand more about this thing from this thing, and we can understand more about that thing from that thing. Our understanding, as we improve, can feed into each other and spark insights. You can rub this together with this, that generates a spark, and you have many insights. That's philosophy. Why? Because if you keep doing that, your insights get bigger and bigger and bigger, until eventually your insights become insights about all of reality. Ousia. That's enlightenment. You're seeing better, and it's yours because you've understood. You could explain this. You could make a movie about it if you wanted to. It's yours. That's the game. level up your seeing, looking for the key terms, looking for their structure and putting them in your skill tree. Are they a group of 3? Over here, we've got a group of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. These 4 here, 1, 2, 3, 4. That goes into our 4 skill tree, our quadrad or our tetrad 4s. We have a group of 12 that goes into a skill tree. Later, when we get into the gods, we might recognize, oh, there are 12 Olympian gods. Maybe we can understand those with our understanding of the dialectic. And vice versa. That's how we rub our categories of understanding together to create a spark of insight. Now, we are doing this for the soul. So we are going into the text and we recognize, so Socrates, his last day on earth, he's talking with his friends. And he says, by the way, what is a true philosopher? And he gives us what a philosopher isn't. Is a philosopher someone who pursues the pleasures, concerned with eating and drinking? How about sexual stimulation? No. How about getting big muscles in your body? How about buying clothes and shoes and ornaments for the body? No. Truly a philosophy disdains them. Oh, so he's describing what a philosopher isn't. So that can go into your category that you make for yourself of the dialectic about a philosopher. But then he goes on and says, by the way, the philosopher tries to liberate the soul from the association with the body. That's what a philosopher is. Okay? And that's fun, because now next time we are on YouTube and YouTube recommends us one of those alpha male podcasts, someone like Andrew Tate, who says, oh, you know what it means? Let me give you my philosophy. My philosophy is to be a good man is to have a Bugatti and have nice clothes and have lots of sex and have big muscles. We can smile to ourselves and say, oh, he hasn't done this. He hasn't got his nose in the Socratic text where the logos is, and he hasn't done the work of pulling out the clues like a detective and putting them into our own dialectic. That's the exercise. He hasn't done it, so he doesn't realize that he's completely off the mark. He's in the what if philosophy doesn't exist category. If philosophy doesn't exist, and keep in mind when we use the word exist, we mean exist eternally. It's not an example or a temporary thing. Right? If philosophy doesn't have an eternal existence, then what are you chasing after? Physical things. Clothes. Shoes. But if philosophy does exist eternally, that means there's an eternal realm. A knowable, experienceable, understandable realm of truth. In which case, you're not going to find it in an Andrew Tate podcast or an alpha male podcast, all that stuff. This is how we can benefit from the dialectic. So, you could say right now, we have talked about all of these notes that we've just done here. We can take those together and put them together and do a dialectic. We can do a dialectic on dialectic. Oh, what if it is and what if it isn't? Well, if dialectic does exist, we have a way of structuring our thoughts. We have a way of seeking the truth. We have a way of preparing our mind to be open to the experience of ousia, which is the knowledge of the beings. Some spiritual traditions call it enlightenment, so you can call it that if you like. But we have the logo so we can understand. There's also understandable. That experience is understandable, so we're experiencing something that can be understood. Right? so we can do a dialectic on the dialectic. And in our world of what if the dialectic doesn't exist, you have Andrew Tate. You have alpha podcasts, capitalist. You have ignorance. You have people fighting because there doesn't have a true existence. If there is, then we can come together because it's knowable. It's for everybody. Right? So we could do a dialectic on dialectic if we wanted to. Or a dialectic on philosophy. And that's what we're being encouraged to do here in the Phaedo. Do your dialectic on philosophy. As we read, pull out the key ideas, the key terms, and build them into your what-if universe. And Socrates has said, hey, not only am I going to, let's go back to the text, not only am I going to thoroughly examine philosophy, the dialectic, I am also going to mythologize. Socrates, let's read this part. Socrates has just said to his friend Simmias, tell Euvenos that if you are of sound mind, you're going to follow me to where I'm going as quickly as possible. Simmias is like, what the heck? You want me to go tell this guy that he should go die? He goes, look, isn't he a philosopher? Well, if he should be willing, all those who share, so we're sharing, we can all share in this life's work called philosophy, and you do so in a worthy way. I'm not saying do violence. I'm not saying kill yourself, but there is a certain kind of way that you could say that you're following after one who is dying. The philosopher should follow after one who is dying. So you're not actually dying for good, but there's something the same. And he says, what do you mean? And he goes, okay, look. Since I am about to journey there is a place where we go when we separate our soul from the body, says Socrates. Okay? So maybe he's onto something. It's Socrates. We must thoroughly examine and mythologize about the journey to that place and what kind of place we think self is. Or what else should one do in the time before the sun sets? Wow. Okay, so when we do our dialectics on whatever you're interested in, specifically do a dialectic on the dialectic. Hey, isn't the dialectic awesome? Don't you want to make it yours? Then do a dialectic on it. Don't you think philosophy is rad? Then do a dialectic on it. That's what we're being encouraged to do in this text. But not only that, do the dialectic, but he said also, don't just thoroughly examine it, but also thoroughly examine. How do you spell thoroughly? Thoroughly examine, but also mythologize. That's what Socrates is saying to do. That's the Z here. So, do your dialectic on whatever you're interested in. We're doing one on the soul right now. But then, hey, find a character you really like. Maybe you already know a lot about him, like Spider-Man, or maybe Zeus, or Apollo, or Achilles, or anyone. SpongeBob. Some character that you already know about. Socrates did one on Aesop's fables. Or make your own characters. Create your own universe. So that you can mythologize. That's the dialectic. Do both. Now, what's interesting about that is we are getting both in this text. We are getting Socrates thoroughly examining what it means to be a philosopher, why a true philosopher wants to follow one who is separating their soul from their body or dying. What is the soul itself? What do we want as philosophers? The truth and this thing called phronesis we still have a question about. But also the way in which it's being communicated is in a story. Phaedo and his friends met every day outside the prison to talk about self, to discuss philosophy, to discuss Socrates. Every day, as a discipline, waiting for the doors to be opened where they could be with Socrates. Is that the same ideas? Are we preparing ourselves over and over by reading this text every day, over and over? Developing our own dialectics? Talking ourselves and talking with our friends if other people join us in the chat? Are we waiting for the insights to be revealed because we're purifying ourselves in that way? So we could say that this text is both. This text is a mythology, and that's what we're looking for as we read. Can we look for the ideas, nail them down in our dialectics, and can we also look at how they're mythologized in the story? Why? Because it says so. On the 7th page, he's saying, this is what I'm doing. This is what you should do. That's pretty cool, I think. So, we are doing that on the soul. So, if the soul doesn't exist on its own, separated from the body, what follows? We'll always be dragging along our sense perceptions with our reasoning and understanding, our dianoia. How will it affect us? It will trouble the soul. It will be a corrupting agent. What's false about it? Well, we'll never sufficiently attain what we desire. That's how it will affect us, self to others. What else do we have? It will fill us with many passions, desires, fears, and all sorts of illusions and foolishness. Let's add that. Filled with all sorts of many passions. Many is important. It's not one. We're even more divided. Many passions, desires, many desires pulling us in many directions. Fears, illusions, and foolishness. Oh. So that the saying goes, in truth and in reality, not any mindfulness of any kind ever whatsoever arises in us because of self. Okay, so again, truth in reality and mindfulness. Those are the big two he keeps laying out. These should jump out at us. He keeps repeating truth and mindfulness, truth and mindfulness. Not a truth, like what's true about, I don't know, if you've got petrol in your car. Truth itself in reality and mindfulness. So what's false? You could say what's false is false. Let's go to the screen. So we can see our categories of what's false. Truth and reality and mindfulness. truth in reality and mindfulness, or phronesis. This is a big question. What's phronesis? Arise. They are arise. Okay? This is how the soul affects us. Arise for us, truth and reality, mindfulness and phronesis. Of course, as you go through this, you might recognize that, that would fit better in the other one. In what if the soul does exist? Or maybe one of the other categories, like maybe this is more others to others. That's cool. If that's the case, make those changes in your dialectic. I encourage you to have fun with this. For the body and its desires gives us nothing other than war, civil discourse, and battles. That sounds like others to others. That's how we relate to each other. War, civil discourse, and battles. Sounds like the way the world is.
What?
Sounds like the way the world is right now, maybe?
What?
Maybe it is.
What?
All right. In which case, that's something else that comes to light for us when we do this dialectic. You might recognize, I am seeing certain difficulties that I'm facing in my life. When I relate others to others, I'm one of the other. To my friends at school, my girlfriend, my football team, I'm always in battles and war with them. There's always civil discord. If this is what happens, I might trace the cause back to this. Especially if this is what follows if I am not able to separate the soul and have self according to self. But in the other category, in the other what if universe, if the soul is able to be itself alone, there is harmony, then maybe I can point to the cause of my own conflicts in my world. Interesting, right? Also, might recognize it for your football team, a group you're in, or humanity itself. Is humanity suffering from war, civil discord, and battles? Could it be that you discover by doing this dialectic the root cause of such problems? This is another really cool thing that arises for us as a result of doing this dialectic. So let's add in war, civil discord, and battles. This is 3. Others to others. War. Civil discord and battles. Right? We can also speculate. Okay, hang on a second. So we can derive our own what ifs. So if this is what happens on this side of the dialectic, but on the other side, what if the soul is? What if philosophy is? If on the other side, we have a different way, we act differently, we're doing this instead, we're believing and saying this kind of this thing, and we affirm it to be the truth in our own understanding and knowledge, and we're not busy with fighting, war, civil discord, and battles. what would follow? What could you infer as a remedy? Right, so as a doctor, you might recognize problems, a lack of harmony in the body, but you also not just have to study sick bodies, you have to know what is true of the ideal body to compare it to the ideal paradigm. What is and what isn't. So let's jump into the text. So we are experiencing the implications of what follows, perhaps, for those to which philosophy doesn't exist, or the soul separate from the physical body doesn't exist. So is Socrates diagnosing human problems on his last day on earth? Or is he leaving us what we need to diagnose it for ourselves? Interesting. What a curious man this Socrates is. For all wars arise through the acquisition of possessions. For it is for the sake of the body that we are compelled to acquire riches, and being enslaved to its care. Because through all of this, we have no leisure for philosophy. Okay, this sounds like how we relate back to the body. So how do we relate others to others if soul doesn't exist on its own? War, civil discord, battles, acquiring riches, acquiring possessions. Yes, compelled to acquire riches, possessions, and riches. And then how do we relate back to ourselves if the soul doesn't exist on its own? We are enslaved to its care. So we have in the text, we are enslaved to its care. Here, I like that. And we have no leisure for philosophy. So we've got a positive and a negative. What's true and what's false. We can add that in. So what's true is we are enslaved to its care. Okay, do we see in that language something reflecting the mythology of the story? Socrates being chained, the idea of master and slave. Who is Socrates listening to? The 11 who sentenced him to death, his dreams. Who is Credo listening to? The prison warden who doesn't want to give 2 potions to kill Socrates. Enslavement versus freedom. What's false? Is we have no leisure for philosophy. We have no L-E-I. No leisure for philosophy. Oh my God. What a disaster. See, this is a huge implication that results, so you can recognize this in your own world. Do I have time for philosophy if I'm chasing physical things to care for my physical body? How long do I have to spend in the gym each day? How long do I have to spend acquiring food? How long do I have to spend getting a roof over my head? And what kind of a world do we live in when everyone's chasing after their own personal riches and wealth, acquiring possessions and riches, and engaged in war and civil discord and battles to do so? Does it describe this lack of harmony we're facing in our world right now? We're learning. But worst of all, the fact is that if there arises for us some rest from the body, and we turn to some, okay, so the word is self there, but we can tell by the lowercase s that is probably the lower version, refers to the particular, but we can read it, that if we have some rest from self, the body, but could we read both? This is a fun game actually. In philosophy, try and read all three and see what comes to light. The fact is, if there arises some rest from the body, and we turn to some study, everywhere in our search it falls in and presents itself in a clamour and pouring in, and it drives us out of our mind. So that we are not enabled by self to behold the truth, but as it has truly been shown to us. If we ever intend to enter into a certain pure state, one must be liberated from self. And must behold the self-realities with the self-soul. At that time, as it seems likely, shall we attain to that which we desire and of which we claim to be lovers, of phronesis. When we are dead, as the Logos points out, but not while we live. Okay, so we could read the same passage again and say, when we have some rest from self, the body, when we have some rest from the ideas, when we have some rest from the oneself, only one fits. But here, if we intend to enter into a pure state, one must be liberated from self, the body, and we must hold the self being realities with the self soul. Now that could be either, it could be the one self, or it could be the being self. You can make a case for either there, I think. As it's the self-soul, maybe that's the realm of being that can behold the realities, but maybe because it's the word self, you could even go beyond that and say, well, actually, what is beholding the realities? Even with the self, with the pure soul, the whole soul, not our particular souls, the whole soul. What has the soul? What's looking through the soul to perceive the realities when it has been liberated from the body? This is one of the tricks, one of the games in philosophy that you can only see if you have the Balboa translation, because it translates altos as self, the actual Greek, and you recognize the triad. Let's add it to our triads we've got. So far today, we've been talking about these two triads. These two here. But we could also look at another triad, which is, we have the honorific, like the ideal, like in being, and the ultimate. Because those are the three uses of the word self. We could also throw in there another triad of the world of becoming, the body that we are talking about separating from, with our physical senses. We don't want to drag our physical senses and the body along with us. Why? Why don't we want to do that? Oh, easy. These reasons. We'll be filled with many passions, desires, fears, and illusions and foolishness. So what? Oh, you know why? What's the problem about that? Who cares? Well, because then we're going to be engaged in war, civil discourse, and battles. Oh, really? Yeah, and we'll spend our life acquiring possessions and riches. Oh. Yeah, but so what? So what? So we'll be enslaved to the care of our body, and we'll have no leisure for philosophy. That's the worst thing. So we can use this dialectic to answer the questions that come up for us quickly and easily and simply, and practice it. We should. That's why we should share our questions with people. We're giving others an opportunity to test out, try out that dialectic, put it into action. But also we can answer those counterattacks. Keep in mind, when Socrates first learned the dialectic from Parmenides, this is in the previous series, but this quote sums it up. You don't even need to have to go back. When Socrates first learned the dialectic, when he first became a philosopher, he met his teacher Parmenides when he was a young boy. Parmenides laid out, this is how you do it. This is the logos and the dialectic. So we saw in the text here the idea of there being a straight line, a straight path with no deviations to guide us along the logos. Okay, that seems to be the dialectic, along with separating from our physical senses. So how do we use the logos? With the dialectic. It's the power of the dialect. Power of the logos is the dialectic. Now we have this quote. Parmenides says to us in Socrates, we must permit the ideas of real beings to exist. We have to keep our mind fixed on the objections that come up. We must define each one of the particular ideas. That's what we've been learning today with the two kinds of the dialectic, how we define them. That's where we turn our dianoia, understanding. But we also have to allow the idea of each one of the real beings to be of the self. This is the power of dialectics. Now, keep our mind fixed on the objections. One of the great things about the dialectic is you have the material to answer those objections. Someone says, you have to permit the ideas of real beings to be. Well, why? Well, hang on a second. I don't agree. Explain why that's a big deal. Oh, easy. Well, it has to exist because that's what ousia is. And the soul only can see it because that's the noesis, the direct intuitive knowing of ousia in each being. And then objection might come up to you. As you're doing this, you might have your own voices that might resemble family members or old teachers or cultural myths that tell you to stop doing it or tell you that you're not good enough. Something against the self. Your self is not good, so we could go back to this triad and understand our objections. The ultimate self is no good. Your mind, the honorific being, your mind is no good. Or there is no realm of mind. And the particulars that you put together in the dialectic can never reach there. Your understanding is no good. You're too stupid. Your mind is no good. Reality doesn't exist. You can't know it. Or the one self, you are inadequate. You are fundamentally a sinner. So these are objections or counterattacks against the three levels of reality. It's what's false. So we can recognize the counterattacks are our anti-logos or pathologos. And because we are building skill trees, we can connect it and realize, oh, really? Well, if this is a triad, and if it aligns with this triad, our problems are false. Oh, and what we're learning through the logos about the ultimate, the honorific, and the realm of becoming is true. Oh, and my mythology could be both. It could either be crap telling me that I'm no good, or God is evil, or I'm sinful, or whatever the hell. Or it could be true. It could be this mythology that we're getting from Socrates, who isn't a dope. Okay, so this is the significance of playing this game, developing our triads, adding to your skill tree, putting this in your pocket, taking it with you in your inventory. It allows you to rub two things together to see them clearly. Also, the benefit of the dialectic is you can answer them. Oh, so what? So what if there's a realm of being, or if there's a soul separate from the body? Who cares? Why do you want to do that? Do something else. Be good. Go to the gym. Get money. Be an alpha. Why? Oh, easy. I'm just going to pull up my dialectic on the soul. What if it is? Oh, it will purify me. It will liberate me. And it's what I have to do to acquire truth and phronesis, the two most important things. The truth about reality, and also a state of being that is the ultimate state of being, or the ultimate virtue, called phronesis, that we still don't quite know about, but it's the most important thing. So we can answer those counterattacks. So that quote from Parmenides at the start of the journey of Socrates has more, we can understand it in greater depth from going to the end of Socrates' life. This collecting of ourselves together by exercising in the way that appears to be useless, called empty talk, the dialectic, well, the truth will utterly elude you. Oh, really? Collect ourselves together? You mean separate from... Okay, now we go into our dialectic. Could that mean collecting ourselves together? Do you mean away from the physical senses? Let's look at the negative. What if we are not doing this? Oh, we're filled with many passions. Oh, we're not collected together at all if we are not separating ourselves from our senses. We have many passions, many desires, many fears, many illusions, many foolishness. Oh, so is this what he means by collect ourselves together? This dialectic, we can ousia, or turn about and apply it to what we saw at the start to understand it better. The truth will utterly elude you. Oh, this truth, that if you can get and make yours, you can get a state called phronesis. Interesting. Oh, and truth is this. Interesting. So we can use our dialectic that we develop to better understand the logos we have already, but also better understand how to answer and silence those counterattacks or objections. So, we are better understanding this. We permit the ideas of real beings to be. Oh, you mean of the soul, in that realm that the soul can see. Keep your mind fixed on the objections and others like them. Oh, well, now that I keep my mind fixed on them, I can use my dialectic to answer them snappily. Hey, this is what... No, of course that's wrong. Right? This is the power of dialectics. Oh, now I'm getting the power of dialectics more. I see it has a power. It has a power to do both. To do what? Let's go back. Power to address and silence what's false. The dialectics has a power to move us along to what's true, and to create a mythology that could be about both. The dialectics has a power to do what? Philosophy. A power to do what? Solve our problems. A power to what? Create mythology. Okay, but we can go to all of our, we can use everything on our skill tree. That's what it means to level up. So another triad was the world of becoming, the world of being, and the one self. The first hypothesis of Parmenides. Interesting. Can we use any of these three to better understand either of these others? Let's try it. Well, our new one is true, false, and both. Could we say the realm of becoming is fundamentally false or causing problems? What it sounds like from this. Could we say that there's a realm of being, which is honorific, that we want to reach? But can we also use this triad to understand the realm of being? Can we create a new question that goes into our question sack? So we've got an if question sack and we've got an if sack of hypotheses. That's what we take with us. Could being be understood with this triad? Take it as a hypothesis. That's a good question. In what way could the realm of being be said to be true if the realm of becoming is not? But in what way can you say the realm of being is false? Well, if there is an honorific, if there is a ultimate, is there a higher kind of truth than the truth of reality? In that way, could it be false? So we are getting a deeper insight and seeing into the realm of becoming simply by playing this fun game of applying our triads to each other, rubbing two sticks together and seeing if a spark comes. Maybe. Allows us to look at being in a new way. Could being be true in one way, but not true in another way? Or, well, if there's an ultimate beyond being. So this is the fun of having these triads. So we are on this dialectic. But worst of all, okay, so even if we do get rest from the body, it falls in and presents itself in a clamor, pouring in, drives us out of our mind. I can't sit on the mat meditating, or I can't focus on this text. I'm too hungry. I need my coffee. I need my biscuits. I'm too tired. I need my coffee. Right? What pulls us away from philosophy? Physical things. Hungry, tired. Difficult to sit in one place for a long time. If we want to enter into a pure state, we must be liberated from the body. If we must behold the self-realities with the self-soul. That's what we want to do. This is part of our goal. So we have, I guess this is both true and false. Sometimes we can get rest from the body, but sometimes it will fall in and present itself a clamor and drive us out of our mind. So we could say what's true and false of how we relate back to our soul if we can't get it to exist completely on its own. We've got a true and false. That we can sometimes have rest, hey, sitting here and going through this text, I have some rest from my physical impulses and desires and fears that can distract me, take me away. Oh no, I need to get money to pay for rent. Oh no, that could drive me out of my mind with fear and anxiety. It makes it difficult to focus on this. Or, oh no, I need some food, but I can get some rest from it. Sometimes have rest from the body. the body, and that includes the fears, desires, illusions, foolishness. Fears, desires, illusions, foolishness, and also passions, desires, are in there. Pains or aches, we throw that in there. But then it will again falls in presents itself in a clamor. Clamor. In a clamor. Pours in and drives us out of our mind. So that we are not enabled by self to behold the truth. But as it has truly been shown to us, we enter a pure state, we have to be liberated from ourselves. Okay. So we are not able to, therefore, not able to behold the truth. Okay. So we've got a true, false, and both true and false of fourth category, other back to ourself, if the soul can't exist on its own, self by self. But we have on here if we want to enter a pure state, we have to be liberated from the body to behold the self realities with the self soul. And at that time, we shall attain that which we desire and of which we claim to be lovers of mindfulness. Okay, this is a big twist. We're not philosophers. Ultimately, we upgrade to philophronesos. Interesting. When we are dead, okay, dead doesn't mean your last death, it means separating from the body. As the logos point out, but not while we're alive, while we live in the body. For it is not possible to intuitively know in a pure way with the body. Okay, so we have, we can behold the self-realities with the self-soul and attain that which we acclaim to be lovers, mindfulness. Okay, so we can add this. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of if the self doesn't exist, the soul doesn't exist. Now we can go and do number 4, which is how do we relate back to the soul if it does exist, and we can enter a pure state. Pure state. Liberated from the body. So you could say that's what's true. Let's move this down a little bit then. What's false? We are liberated from the body. I guess you could say that. You could phrase that as though it's false. We are. No, okay. I don't want to even do that. Let's just keep it as true. Yeah, liberated from body. That sounds like fun. And we attain our object of love, phronesis. Okay, so we've got a nice dialectic. Well done. Big ups to us. Cool. And we're going to keep reading, and after we've read some more, we could go back to the start and do it again if we want. Even having gone through this, we probably have developed some new insights, and the little tangents we took to apply our triads, and to reflect on the questions that were shared in the chat as we went, helped us to see more and more. So we could all reflect it back in here. Oh, and by the way, we could write a song about it, or write a movie about it. Any film directors or video game writers or TV show writers out there who are interested in putting this into mythology, yeah, hit me up. If you've got a budget. Of course, we're not doing that to acquire possessions and riches, because that will make us enslaved to the care of the body. We want to do it as an exercise for philosophy. So that we can what? Oh, we're not able to behold the truth if we do it the other way. So we can obtain our object of love, phronesis. Yay. We've done some good work, and amazingly, we've done so much and we've seen so much today, but we're only halfway through this part here. And that's something unique about philosophy. On a personal note, when I got into philosophy 20 years ago, this was one of the things that really stood out to me. Sometimes I'd be in a group or a meeting or a meetup or a class where we would spend 2, 3, 4 hours on one page or one sentence. And at the end of it, I'd be thinking, what the heck is going on? I've never been in a reading group like this before. We seem to be so ineffective. How can you spend 2 hours on one sentence? We're never going to get through the book. I'm used to school where you're rewarded by, when I was little, we would get pizza if we would read a book. So we were encouraged to read as much as we can as quickly as possible. And the book reports, you didn't even have to understand. You just have to project your interpretation onto the text. And if it sounds nice enough, you get a pizza or you get a good grade. So this was one of the things that really stood out to me when I first got into philosophy. And it might be sticking out to you as something curious as well. How can you spend so long reading just a half a page as we have today? That's the game. Why? We are going over it in detail. I mean, we've got in detail. in detail. No, detail. Detail. So I'm just pulling up from the text all the times we've seen detail come up. Certain details. What are the details? Page 3. It starts with Socrates saying, hey, the people didn't have the details. Hey, no one, the citizens of Philus rarely visit Athens. So okay, this is fun actually. Going back to the very start of the text, we can see more in what was there to begin with. He's saying, hey, what were the logos Socrates spoke prior to his death? Since neither does any of the citizens of Philus visit Athens nowadays. Are we revisiting? Nor has any visitor come from there for a long time who can give us a clear report. We're spending a long time on a small section so we can give a clear report. We're putting it into our dialectic so we can give a clear report. Whether we're answering our objections, purifying and perfecting our understanding to be open to ousia, or creating a mythology. It's a triad. Of which what happens, except that he drank the poison and died. Imagine being there at the death of Socrates, and we are only like a dozen or so pages in. There are so many details, and all they said, oh, what was the death of Socrates like? Oh yeah, they said, well, he drank the poison and he died. What? That's crazy. Boo. Right? That's hilarious to us. That there was such amazing detail and puzzles given to us. Koans, spiritual puzzles that we can solve and gain insight from. And all these people from Philistines, we could call them. I don't know if that's a thing. But they're from Philus, visiting Athens, which probably represents us, philosophers, lovers of wisdom, and also Philophrenesis, apparently, lovers of phronesis. Those people who are not in the game, all they could say, oh yeah, he just drank poison and died. What a stupid way of reporting the last day of Socrates. Had no further details to report. He wants details. Where else do we see details? What were his details pertaining to his self-death, the logos and deeds? And who was present? Also, Socrates is saying, hey, Phaedo, attempt to tell every detail as exactly as you possibly can. I will describe in detail, all right, repetition, the significance of detail. So, a question I had coming in, how can we spend hours on one page? That doesn't seem like an efficient way of reading, but these guys are philosophers. These are the wisest people, or the people interested in wisdom. How come they're reading in such a different way? Well, now, using this dialectic that we've just put together, I can have a hypothesis to answer that question. Well, my metric, my paradigm of what is good is based on this. What's effective? What is what I can do to acquire more books, have more possessions, gather more things, acquire possessions and riches. That way of thinking that to read well is to read a lot is based on this physical, corrupted view of reality. Whereas what we're doing now is we're gaining something by reading in this detail. Spending a few hours on just one passage gives us what we need to be liberated from that ignorance to attain our object of love. It's a method, it's a strategy, it's a preparation, it's a purification and a liberation. Enters into a pure state. where we can attain truth and phronesis. That's why. So, if you're wondering, wow, we only got halfway through this passage. How come? Well, that's why. Detail. We're doing it for a reason. It's meaningful. This is the meaningful game. So, I might just... we have enough already from this first half of this passage to fill out a pretty good, though not excellent, we want to seek excellence, but a pretty good dialectic on the soul. Of course, we want to go back and keep doing it as best as any man can, of course. But let's finish this passage. I'll read the last part of this passage, and maybe some questions will come forward that we can hold on to till the next one. If we ever want to enter into a certain pure state, one must be liberated from the body, and we must behold the self-realities with the self-soul. And at that time, as it seems likely, again, likely is a hypothesis. In this realm, all we can do is use this to gain a likely hypothesis. We want to confirm it with our knowledge when we can pull this stunt off. But this creating ifs, or what seems likely, is our method, is our strategy. Shall we attain to that which we desire and of which we claim to be lovers of phronesis, mindfulness? When we are dead, as the Logos points out, but not while we live. For if it is not possible to intuitively know, noesis, that direct beholding through ousia, touching at every point, knowing it completely, if it is not possible to know in that pure way with the body, then one of two results is the case. Either we can never know that which is to be possessed, okay, that which we need, or when we are dead. For at that time, the soul will be self by self. Self by self. That's our first category of the dialectic. We just did a self by self on the soul. Interesting. So again, so we can see this more clearly having done a dialectic on the soul, of which self by self was the first category. So either we can never know that, or when we're dead. For at that time, the soul will be self by self, separate from the body, the other half of the dialectic, the what if it's just the body, or what if it's mixed with the body. It'll be self by self, separate from the body, but not before. And while we live, as seems likely, we shall be closest to knowing in the following way. What we want to do, get as close as we can. When we neither associate with or commune with the body as much as possible, not any more than is necessary. We must not be filled with that nature. We must purify ourselves from the body until the divine self should liberate us. And thus being purified, on the one hand, by having been liberated of the phronesis directed to the body, we shall be likely to be with such a kind. And through ourselves we shall know all that is pure. And on the other hand, this is likely to be the truth. For it is not lawful for that which is not pure to attain that which is pure. Such, I believe, O Simmias, must be the doctrine we repeat to each other and believe. At least all those who are right lovers of learning. Or dost thou not believe in this way? Okay? So, a call back to what we saw. We repeat to each other and believe. What does that? Thankfully, we have a dialectic in our pockets. We can make sense of that. So in our dialectic on the soul, we saw what the soul is when it's separated on its own. Noesis, direct intuitive knowledge of ousia in each being. We can also add what we just got from this part. We can add, so we can, having gone through the dialectic, we saw that the last category was we enter a pure state, liberated from our body, and attain our object of love, phronesis. Okay? So, this is the other this is a primary significance of the dialectic. We take the key terms from the end that arise, that surface from this activity, and we useer it back to the beginning. We take it back to the beginning. So now we can go back to our first category and say, what is the self? Noesis, direct intuitive knowledge of ousia in each being. Also, phronesis. Phronesis. The kind of phronesis we love. Because there is a phronesis directed to the body that we want to separate from. Also, it's a pure state. These are the conclusions. Others back to self. This is how we relate back to self, but also in the dialectic itself, we can take it back to the start and start again. So the next time we do a dialectic on the self, we're going to include the object of our love. What is the self itself? Oh, it's what we love. It's pure phronesis. It's pure state. So we can add those in. Okay. Also, we saw when he finished his doctrine. I mean, awesome. Good doctrine, Socrates. He did say, this is the doctrine we have to repeat to each other and believe. Okay, so we can go back in here and say, oh, I know what he's saying. This is the others to others. We repeat to each other and believe. Others to others. This is how we relate to other philosophers. Memorize that doctrine. Having it in a dialectic will help, because it's yours now. You don't have to memorize it word for word if you understand it. If you understand it, you can repeat it accurately because you know it in understanding. So, repeat it, believe it, say it to others, and we can add in the idea of repeat from the end. Repeat. Oh, this is what we believe and say to others. What was the final conclusion of the text? This is the doctrine we must repeat to each other and believe. Pretty cool, right, Owen?
Wow. Wow.
Wow. Yeah. So, also, we have some more details. That which is pure attains to that which is pure. That makes sense. So we have some reasoning we can add to our explanation of why that's the case. Would make sense. If we want to attain that which is pure, that which is phronesis of the soul, then we have to be that as close as we can. So, we must repeat this to each other and believe it. For all those who are right lovers of learning. So we have an activity. Make your dialectic. Repeat it. Oh, that's another good thing. If you've made a mythology out of it, then it's a handy way of repeating it. Because those who are not interested in philosophy yet, they haven't awakened it yet, or they're just not familiar with it yet, you can be doing this. You can be repeating it to them by talking about Spider-Man, by talking about SpongeBob, or talking about a comic book character you've made, or by making a game. You are repeating it. They just don't know it because it's in mythology. Until they become curious and they realize there are some puzzles in what you're doing, and then they can awaken philosophy themselves. And then hopefully enough of us human beings will awaken to this quest, and then we can have what we need to solve the problems we're suffering through. Because what? Oh, because quite clearly, quite obviously and simply and rationally, we are facing the implications of what follows. Number 3, others to others if we don't have this doctrine. We are suffering war, discord. We are not harmonized. We are in battles. We are faced with trying to acquire more stuff for yourself. Billionaires getting rich while everyone else gets poorer. No one can afford a place to live. No one can afford food. People are being destroyed. Humanity is on the verge of extinction. Well, obviously, it's what happens if you don't have this doctrine. Rationally speaking, empirically speaking, this we have to believe and repeat, but also we have to affirm this to be true. We have to go through some process of affirming that it's actually the truth. It's not just another opinion. It's not just another thing to fight about. It's true. How can we affirm it to be true? Well, we need to know what the truth is, capital T. What is the truth? How do we affirm that's truth? Well, we have to somehow acquire the truth. How do we do that? This game. How do we relate to other philosophers? Repeat this. Believe it. Believe it and confirm it. That's the game.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So, also, before we go, there was one other cool triad that maybe we can pull out before we say goodbye today. For all those who are right lovers of learning. So, we have lovers of learning. We have lovers of mindfulness up here. Lovers of mindfulness. And also philosophy, which is lovers of Sophia. Philos, Sophia. So we have some terms. Philosophia, philophrenesis, and Okay. I don't know that Greek. So let's copy that. Jarvis, are you there?
A virtual artificial intelligence.
But are you there?
I'm here to assist you with a variety of tasks as best I can.
Okay, please pull up the internet. Take us to space, Jarvis.
Importing all preferences from...
Okay, so we've got the word here, and it's pronounced philomatis. There's our philo. That's PH. The I is an I. That man is a L. The O is an O. That's half of an M. That's an A. That circle with a line is a TH. EIS. That looks like the same. Okay, philomatis. And in Greek, it means lover of learning. Okay, we know that. But we want to know what the matis means. Because philo means lover. So let's get matis. Okay, sometimes Perseus doesn't want to play along. Wiktionary is always on board. Mentheo. To learn. Okay, it's just what it is. But we have the way of saying it. Philomatis. So we have philomatis. We have a couple of new keywords. We have philosophy, philophronesis, and what was it? Philomatis. Mathesis. So our question is, what is the relationship? This is a lover of wisdom. This is a lover of this mysterious virtue. This is learning. Now, if we to figure that out, we can look to our triads. One triad we have is one of the most primary ones of being, power, and activity. Now, all of them are a kind of activity. Because it's a love of something. You are desiring it. You're not there yet. If once we're there, we have phronesis. We have Sophia. We have wisdom. We have completed our Matthias. Okay, but we're not there yet. We're a lover of those things. So, I suggest this would be a triad within this triad here. So it would be a triad of activity. So this would be like this, and this. Okay, let's just delete that. So I think there would be a being triad. There would be a power triad, and there would be a activity triad, and that'd all be themselves connected in a triad. This would be my speculation, my hypothesis. And because all of these are lovers, this would be this triad here would be what we're looking at. Now, keep that in our pockets for later if we find something later to do with power and being. But for now, we're using this as the archetype to understand the order. Philosophy, phronesis, and Matthias. Which is more like the activity? Well, this is learning. So I think this is in the right spot. I think this is kind of the activity. Does phronesis give us a state of mind or a power? So we can also tie in our understanding of this triad from other triads. We've also read that as being within the triad of oneself, being, and becoming. So we could use being to understand this. Mind, we also see it in terms of the logos, our state of mind, and the self. So what we're doing is we're using our skill tree to connect the branches from other triads. This is a triad skill tree. To better understand power. So we're populating power so that we can gain an insight into which of these two would be the power term. So mind, being, power. What else do we have up here? Honorific. Both true and false. Mythology, being. We've already got being. So we can see if any of these help us gain insight into this term. Both true and false? Interesting. There's a question. Which would be more like power or mind or being? Which would be... so this is being, a different kind of being. Being as a different kind of being, like the realm of being. Realm of being. This is being as in its nature. Or the essence. So, from these, I'm going to say that phronesis is our object of love. And if it's the virtue above the other virtues, I would put this up here. Maybe philosophy is our power of our learning to reach that. Or maybe philosophy is are we primarily philosophers or are we primarily philophonesicists? I don't know. Well, as phronesis is a virtue, that might be something that we can take into our state of mind, in which case it would power us. And we do say we're philosophers ultimately. So I might stick with this triad here, but it's a question. So it goes into our question stack. We bring it along with us. But we have a nice triad of lovers. We are. So somebody says, "What are you?" "Oh, I'm a lover, but I'm in a complicated relationship. I have 3 partners. I have 3 loves. I'm in a polygamous, or I'm in a tripigamous relationship. I'm a lover of wisdom, philosophy. I'm a lover of the state of phronesis, philophronesis, and I'm a lover of learning, philomathesis." And then someone will go, "Oh, you slut." No. They're all just 3 parts of the same kind of love. And they'll say, "What do you call that?" And we'll say, "Well, I don't know. Maybe there's a monad above that incorporates all of them." That's another question we'll take with us. Is there a monad that incorporates all 3 of those kinds of loves? Question mark. Just like we have a model. Well, we have over here. We talked about the virtues. There's a triad of virtues, an activity of temperance, a power of courage, and a state of being of wisdom. But above those is justice, which applies to all. So justice applies to all because they're all doing their right functioning in the right way at all times. But also to get yourself into a state of justice, you need those 3. And then we have our mysterious 5th term. So we could even say there's a 5 in here. A 5 skill tree, because there's a phronesis virtue, which is the mysterious one that we're trying to figure out in this text. Meaning, we've already have a kind of skill tree allowing us to ask this: what is the order of this triad, and is there a monad above it? So it'd be like this. It goes to those, but also these lead into. And then, of course, seeing as we got our first 5, I think that's the first 5, our quadrad that we have, that maybe there's another virtue up here that's like phronesis. But for this, is there a love above love that unifies love of wisdom, love of phronesis, and love of learning? I don't know. Question. But a handy triad to have that we will continue to play with, and maybe it'll be material for insights. So on that note, here we are at the end of this doctrine. We have a new triad to play with, which is fun. And we've seen the significance of going through the dialectic, and we've seen how going through that dialectic helped us to understand the end. Repeat to each other and believe, oh, that's others to others. At least those who are right lovers of learning. You take this and add it back into your dialectic if you like to populate it better. I encourage you to do so. And if you do create anything, a dialectic or a myth, share a link in the chat. Share your insights with others. This is for everyone. We are all on this quest together.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
Because this is the human quest. We are all the true adventurers.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.